problem with being last is that I'm very conscious of time now. But and as I was going through and hearing everybody, and first of all, I just want to commend everybody who stood up here before me and shared their story, because I know sharing a story can be hard. And I was debating what to speak about. I didn't send Rob or John or anyone any remarks before coming here, because I never speak scripted. I always speak from the heart. And I found that to be very helpful, because more often than not, when I'm speaking to people who have tremendous power. Because at Vera, I'm oftentimes in the faces of commissioners from departments of corrections, directors, or executive officials at the federal level for entire initiatives that are meant to help people who are in prison. And mind you, when I walked to the Vera Institute of Justice and started working there as a program analyst, um, that happened nearly 2.5 years into being at Vera. I started there as an intern. I started there 6 months after having been released. I started there while I was still on parole. I started there fresh out of the system with an experience that viscerally affected the rest of my life. When I walked into the system, I was 15 years old. I was 16 years old. I had committed a crime at 15 years old, 363 days. And I'm very specific with the days because up until recently, New York State at 16 would try any young person as an adult and send them to Rikers Island. We now have the race to age legislation, thank God. After years of advocacy, we no longer are going to be doing that. By 2017, by the end of this year and the end of next year, 16 and 17-year-olds will be off of Rikers Island as well. We still haven't figured out where exactly and how exactly they will be treated or what programs they will get. So that's the only flaw with the plan. We don't have the back end of the plan all figured out. And I know that because I work at an organization that is working with city government and is working with the people who are making these decisions on a day to day. And I always come to that work and to that job feeling an extreme sense of urgency, but also, sort of having to bear that responsibility on my back. That I'm in an institution where we're constantly working with people who have this ability to really transform the lives of people who've been affected by the criminal justice system and ultimately who've been hurt in many ways by the criminal justice system. And one thing that I'd like to point out is that, Gigi, now I'm just blanking on names, the Mingo, everybody who presented earlier and who spoke, each of them had families. Each of them had people in their lives who were affected by the fact that they were incarcerated. Their communities were also affected because you now remove a person who could have been contributing to that community for those years that they spent while incarcerated. But for some of us, when we're in the system, we're not thought of in that way, right? We're only thought of as that moment in time where we screwed up, made that horrible mistake, where we committed a huge act of violence that led us into the system. And that was me at some point. I work at Vera now. I am a nationally recognized youth partnership expert, is what people call me. And what I do is really tell people who work in the system to listen to the people who are in their system. I mean, that's pretty common sense, right? You want to offer the right services. Who better to listen to than the people who are essentially receiving your services? But I get paid, quite a lot of money just to go and tell people that over and over. But I say that to say that when I walked into Vera and started working there, I was seen as that formerly incarcerated kid. And I was seen also as the kid who committed the crime of attempted murder when I walked into that facility, into the building of the Vera Institute of Justice. But when I walked into the system, that's what I was viewed as, right? I was viewed as the kid who was a gangbanger, who was angry, who was impulsive, who was an alcoholic, who was very much the exact representation of the definition of, quote, a super predator, as Gigi had already mentioned. I was that person who was incorrigible, incapable of change. And these are terms that I heard throughout the course of my life. And the fact that I can constantly talk about them, it's because those were the words that I defined myself by for so long. And those are the words that people who are in the criminal justice system define themselves by on a consistent basis. When I'm in a room sitting down with commissioners, they're always repeating that term: inmate, convict, felons, ex-felons, ex-convicts. Labels matter in ways that you could not imagine. I lived up to my labels. I was a gangbanger. I was angry. I was violent. I was known for extreme acts of violence in the community. And the act of violence that I committed that led me into the justice system was one that many people defined me by for so long. I always think about it to this day, and I've done a lot of more soul searching now and a lot of more intentional steps to taking care of myself, because oftentimes what I've done is bottle up a lot of this stuff, right? I'm sitting in spaces that are triggering in ways that none of you can probably imagine. I'm standing in people of power talking about my life experience as if it was something new to them. And it's like, I live this every day. And for you, this is, again, for some of you, you're sitting in an ivory tower with your high salary, with your nice car, your nice house, your nice family. And I'm talking to you about my family, my pain, my struggles, and my suffering in order to convince you that what we need to do is help people, not harm people. And that's exactly what I've been doing for so long. But for so long, I've been hurting myself, right? I remember at 5 years old having witnessed my grandfather beat my mother, and then a few hours later, my father beat my mother. At 5 years old, that was the most traumatic experience of my life that shaped the reality of my world around me. The two most important men, the two most important role models in my life had hurt the only other person that I loved more than anything in this world, because she was my mother. And ever since then, nothing has been the same. I stand right now on this stage at 25 years old. Many in the joke around the field is that, at 25, your brain is fully developed. That's what the research says. At 25, your brain is fully developed. And I always stand in front of commissioners saying, my brain is fully developed. And everybody just starts bawling in tears and laughter. And then it's just like, people don't know that in those 20 years, I have suffered in so many ways that I have never expressed in public. And it hasn't been only up until recently that I've sought out therapy, that I've sought out the help that I need. And I'm standing here being honest and vulnerable about it, because that's what the system never allowed me to do. It never allowed me to be vulnerable. It never allowed me to speak about my pain. What was said earlier was that when you're in there, you can't show emotion. You can't show the fact that you're weak. Oh, and trust and believe, I didn't show weakness and I didn't show emotion. But I used one other tool, and one of the tools that Domingo mentioned earlier, education. I got my 57 college degrees while I was incarcerated. I got close to an associate's degree and transferred out and got to John Jay, but I still define myself by my past experiences. And those experiences are the things that to this day I still carry, and to this day still affect the way that I communicate with people, affect the way that I communicate to my 8-year-old daughter, affect the way that I communicate to the people around me who consider themselves mentors, friends, and allies to me. I can tell you personally that the experience of having been incarcerated is a very mental process that more often than not, most people can't handle. And the fact that you see men and women who can stand on this stage and talk about their experience, those are some of the strongest men and women that exist in our system. And a lot of them are still in there right now. And so I didn't want to come up here and just tell you my entire story, because sometimes what I end up doing is telling so much of the pain. And again, and this is not to in any way talk poorly of the rest of my peers who came up here before me, but for some, this is trauma porn. Talking about the pain that you felt to people who don't sometimes think about it on a day-to-day, and stand here and talk about it as if it was a book that you're enjoying seeing. I don't enjoy talking about my life experience. I don't enjoy the pain that I've suffered. I certainly do not enjoy walking into a prison in Virginia or in Illinois or in California or in Texas, because my work has allowed me to work in prisons all around the country. I do not enjoy watching those young faces look at me and talk to me about their pain in there, and me being expected to go out and advocate for them and do my best to advocate for them. That's a burden or a responsibility that I carry proudly, but it is also a burden and responsibility that I would not wish on anyone. And the fact that we still have a criminal justice system, that the response when I was incarcerated, I had a call one time. It was a very bad call. My father had beaten my mother. The mother of my daughter had left me. And ultimately, the thing that I thought was my family outside in the community was all broken. And I ended up going back into my cell. I ended up losing my shit. I ended up flipping everything in my room. I ended up throwing everything, punching the walls, punching everything. Staff came in there, and the response to my pain in that moment was a restraint, being thrown into my bed and being my arms pulled to my back and being told to calm down. You tell a young person who's in an extreme amount of emotional pain to calm down. You remember a moment in your lives when you felt a lot of pain and someone to tell you to calm down while holding you down as you're trying to fight them off because you're then in that moment responding to the fact that you're being held down. You tell me how you're going to respond in that moment. And I share that experience because after that, the next day I woke up with literally nothing in my room with an orange blanket. For some people who've been in the system, we know what an orange blanket sometimes means, and sometimes it comes in different colors. You know, they try to make it colorful. But what that meant was that I was in suicide watch. And I was in suicide watch for 3 days, and I had to convince these people that I was not trying to kill myself. What I was doing was reacting to the fact that I was in an extreme amount of pain. I'm constantly reminding people about the fact that we have so many people experiencing these amounts of pain. And yes, some of them have committed extreme acts of violence. But we already saw, and like even in the case of Domingo, some of these cases, you look at them and most of the system, you can't walk in there. There is that like very small percentage of people who are not remorseful. Many who are in there have families. They are sons, they are fathers, they are grandfathers. Many of them have families. And so what I wanted to do to close this out was really just remind each and every one of you of that fact. You know, at 25, I am standing here. I am about to start a new job soon. I'm about to hopefully move out of my house. I have an incredible 8-year-old daughter who's so compassionate, so understanding that when I had a panic attack in front of her about 2 weeks ago, all she could do was tell me, Papi, I love you. It's okay. You need some rest. I will play with Janice, who's my little sister. And she gave me a hug and walked away. And now that little girl, I hope one day will go and do some really amazing things. But because I broke away from the cycle of violence, I broke away from the cycle that I've lived my entire life, where my father was an alcoholic, beating on my mother, beating on me. That is what I did. I beat on people. I hurt people. I did not know how to express myself. And the fact that I can stand in front of you now and express myself is because I've worked on myself. But it's thanks to the people who've been there for me. As Gigi mentioned, mentorship is so important. But what's more important is just people in the community recognizing that we're human beings. Every single person who's in the criminal justice system right now is a human being. And what we have right now is not a criminal justice system, it's a criminal injustice system. And it should not be it should not be criminal justice, it should be human justice. It shouldn't be trauma, it should be healing. It shouldn't be prison, it should be community. And it shouldn't be systems taking away all the responsibility from the family. It should be centered around family. So again, thank you all for being here. And when you walk out of here, please walk out of here and do something to make a difference for the lives of young people around the country, for those families who are being impacted, but especially for the very people who some of you might know personally who might need help. Don't ever assume that a person who's doing so well and smiling and like me, you know, publicly speaking all the time is fine. Because 2 weeks ago, I had a panic attack. I am facing anxiety. I am facing depression. I'm being open and raw about it right now because I want all of you to understand we could be smiling, but that's what the system taught us to do. We needed to be strong. So be there for all the people around you, not just the people who've been in the system, but for all your loved ones, because you never know when that one person is going to need your help. Thank you so much.